Spirit to the Green Spaces Initiative and organizer?
An organizer.
An organizer, okay. Good. Well, hey, good morning. We're trying out our new space in here. We are going to be streaming this on the, I didn't actually ask, is it okay if we stream this on YouTube? I should have asked that question. Thanks to all who helped sort of structure this last minute pivot. We are in a series of, a short series of conversations through the Easter season. So it'll be 3 sessions total, paying attention to spirituality and theology of place. And I did a little bit of framing last week about what that means, but generally seeing that the God that we worship and the way that we bring ourselves into that faith doesn't often have, but can have a deep connection to, ought to have a deep connection to the places we move around in, to the other beings, human and non-human, that we meet in the world around us. I suggested last week, borrowed the words of a theologian who says theology suffers from displacement. We sort of think of it in the abstract, whereas God has actually put God's being and put God's language into material things and into creatures in all the world around us. And the more we neglect those things, actually the less we know about our Creator. I'm excited about this conversation because it integrates the work that we do, the work that we do contemplating our faith in Forum each week, with an ongoing deeply spiritual, ethical work that St. Julian's has been involved in for many, many years now, and that is the work of Central Texas Interfaith. And I'm here with an organizer from Central Texas Interfaith, Warinda Harris. Thank you for being here, Warinda.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me well?
I think I'm probably on mute.
Ah.
I told you, make sure. No, I took myself off mute. We're good. Ms. Harris is organizer at Central Texas Interfaith. She is a graduate of Brandeis University.
That's right. You looked me up.
I did. I looked you up. If you got little pings from Google, somebody's
Gotcha.
searching for you.
That
Was me.
Okay.
And has many, many years of experience in research and interviewing and storytelling. Would love to hear some more about that. And is also a co-author of a book on organizing at HBCUs, a project that you carried out at Houston-Tillotson with some colleagues there. We are, as I said, we have St. Julian's has a long relationship with the folks at Central Texas Interfaith. It used to be called Austin Interfaith when we first began. One of the things that we want to talk about. But first of all, yeah, I just want to greet Ms. Harris and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy week and busy schedule to be here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a joy to be in the house of the Lord.
You just mentioned to me after the Eucharist that you're taking a Sunday off from your own congregation. Tell us where you worship.
I am. I am a member of Congregational Church of Austin, which is one of the West Campus universities just off the campus of University of Texas. And so we've been around a little over 100 years. And as I was telling you, we are in contemplation of how we perhaps look at potentially redeveloping our site. And I came into this space and looked around and thought, this is beautiful. These windows, the openness, the joy that I felt sitting down, I will bring that back to my community.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, send them our greetings.
I will. They did text me and said, hey, are you going to be in church today? I was like, well.
Yes, but.
I'll send you greetings from St. Julian, just not our church.
One of the things I really value in some of the conversations I get to have during this bit of time is just as ecumenical connections. Mm-hmm. We are, as our presiding bishop used to like to say, he probably still says it, but he's no longer a presiding bishop, but a former presiding bishop would say, we are a congregation of the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. We're not the whole thing.
But a part.
And we are deeply connected to the whole body, the
Yes.
body of broader Episcopal churches, Anglican Communion, but then also Christians throughout our neighborhoods, throughout the communities that we move in, and throughout the world. And these little reminders, these little connections are, I think, extremely helpful for that perspective. Like, oh, that's what we're doing. We are trying to be faithful to Christ in a way that pays attention to who we are and who the spaces that we move in, and also seeing ourselves in those connections.
That's right.
Which is a great connection to I think the work of CTI, Central Texas Interfaith. Tell us a little bit about that organization and just what that means and what the work that you all do and that we all do with you.
Yeah. Well, Central Texas Interfaith, as you mentioned, began as Austin Interfaith in the late 1980s. It began in East Austin, in some of the oldest communities of color, some of the oldest church institutions, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Catholic Church Latino, Ebenezer Baptist Church, African American, Holy Cross Catholic Church, also African American, and Mount Olive Baptist Church. And those churches banded together because they were seeing that the community was not being heard by the city leadership, particularly over the issue of schools, over the issue of the funding and resourcing for schools in East Austin. And so they banded together essentially to build power. They felt that, okay, we're not being listened to individually. Perhaps if we work together, we can go to City Hall together and stand together. And that's really how it began. And it has since expanded. That from 1986 to now, we have become Central Texas Interfaith. So from those 4 faith institutions, we are now over 50. And we are no longer all faith institutions. Certainly heavily church and synagogue, but also some public schools, some public health clinics, some law firms, some unions. So we're no longer, although we've kept the name, we're no longer strictly religious institutions, because we found that as we were building power, we wanted to pull others in to that community. So we are nonpartisan, but we are very political. And St. Julian's is a part of the network of institutions that build power and then work to figure out how we shape and use power in our communities. We are led by our leaders, and by leaders, because we work in institutions, the congregants or folks within those institutions, we call leaders. And we work with leaders on the issues that are developed within the communities among and agreed to by the institutions. So we do that by conducting periodic house meetings and cluster meetings where we all come together to talk about what's happening in our institutions, what are we seeing in our communities, is there anything that we need to work on, that Central Texas needs to be read into in order to move toward either locally, state, sometimes nationally. I'm pleased to say that several of our leaders have become state and national leaders. We have folks who are in state government. We have Greg Kassar, who's a congressman, was a leader with Central Texas Interfaith. And so we look to those relationships to make sure that they are being responsive to whatever the community says is important.
My first gathering with Austin Interfaith years ago was when Greg Kassar was it was actually at Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Yes.
When he was a city councilman, and he came as one of the just the participants.
Yeah.
In the group, and that's sort of been a fun connection to sort of watch his career grow from there. And like, oh, he started as a community organizer, paying attention to the things that this particular group of people begin to raise and notice and gather together for.
Exactly, and he does take our calls. Still takes our calls.
He still takes calls. So I would love to hear a little bit more about just you. How did you get involved in this work?
Yeah.
How does one say, oh, I think this interfaith community organizing group is for me.
Yeah, I began as a leader with my church, with Congregational Church of Austin. In fact, I was a leader for over a decade before I became an organizer. And what pulled me in is what pulled many people in, and I believe this was the death of George Floyd. I had been a long-time leader, and certainly, when called upon, would act. If I wanted to make some phone calls, do some block walks, happy to do those things. Even did a few things that outside of my institution and perhaps with our cluster in university area churches. But the death of George Floyd really stirred something inside me that I felt I couldn't shut down anymore. I had so much anger that I did not know what to do with, that it shook my faith. And I found myself writing a letter to my congregation, to my church, saying, they know I have 2 sons. And I've said, I've raised these children in this church, but I've never made any demands of this church. And I am making a demand now that we show up for these young boys and for boys who look like them. And the church responded. We implemented a series of conversations about race, about community, about how we move through these spaces together in a way that keeps us all safe. And I was still struggling. And one of our leaders said, well, Central Texas Interfaith has an opening on the community policing team. You should call and you should check it out. And I did. And the very next week, I found myself in a meeting with the mayor, talking about use of force guidelines, and then a meeting with the police chief, and then having a series of meetings with different police officers at various levels of the police department. And what that showed me was that this was more than me giving money, more than me making a phone call. This was me acting, and I needed my children to see their mother act, and that is how I got into it.
That's such a powerful way to frame that, because I think we've all had the experience of feeling overwhelmed by things beyond our control, by things that were clearly, institutions and just social energy that's bigger than us.
That's right.
And that whatever that thing is, it can feel so frustrating to be like, well, I think I just have to put up with it because I clearly can't do anything about it.
Right.
And what in your own biography, you're telling us about how not a quick and easy fix.
No.
Obviously, but
no, it was a transformation.
How to be with the people who care, and how to amplify your voice by joining it with others, by listening to others.
And by being in community.
By being a community.
Yeah. And also learning how to make my anger useful. That hot anger burns out.
Yeah.
It expends itself, and there's really nothing you can do with it. But if you cool your anger down and become strategic and work with other people and come up with ways to channel that anger into action, I think that is what began the transformation in me. The understanding that I'm a positive person. I can't sit in this anger for the rest of my life. I must be in community with my community.
Yeah. Maybe something that you could help us understand a little bit about this work. Some folks here are very familiar, and some folks who'll be tuning in are very familiar with community organizing, with Central Texas Interfaith, and some aren't. And you've said we are very political.
We are.
And I have heard, I don't know that you've said it, but I've heard, I know how these house meetings go, that they are agenda driven.
They are.
And those are 2 phrases that we usually say, we're not those things. We're not, don't worry, we're not political and we're not agenda driven. Austin, or Central Texas Interfaith says, yeah, we are. We totally are.
We are.
How does that work? How is that an inviting space that isn't like, because I think what that can sound like to people is, I'm going to be forced into somebody's agenda. I'm going to be sort of directed into this political group and either asked to join it or to leave. That's what very political and agenda driven can sound like.
And that's a fair question.
How does it work with you with Central Texas?
A couple of things. One, we mean it when we say we're nonpartisan.
Yeah.
We will work with anyone if the issue is an issue that is of concern to our institutions and to our members. What that means is that we have found ourselves working with folks on both sides of the aisle and no aisle. And we have done it comfortably because we stick to our credo of no permanent adversaries and no permanent allies. That means that, that means that we may not agree with you, congressperson, state rep, on every issue, but we agree to remain in a relationship with you. We agree to talk with you, to put forth the concerns of our community, whether you agree or not, and continue to stay in the relationship so that when the next issue comes up where we align, we move together. The second is that you're right, that agenda is very specific, but it is set by the member institutions. As an organizer, my role is to find leaders who are going to act. It is not to set the agenda. The agenda must be set by the folks at St. Julian's, in relationship with the folks at Congregational Church of Austin, in relationship with the folks at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and all of the others. That does mean that we do not always act on every issue if we are not in consensus. We do need to be in consensus. So there are times when our member institutions act with our blessing without us. And there are times when we act as one. So that's how we address that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think that's really helpful. You are you are director of a particular project at Central Texas Interfaith that has to do with schools and green spaces.
That's right.
I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what you're doing there.
Sure. And I'll just start with how we came into the work, if that's okay. So during the pandemic, we worked very hard to maintain connections with all of our member institutions, and so a lot of that, because we were distancing, was through Zoom. And we were in conversations with all of our institutions, putting on civic academies, making sure that we were talking about vaccine clinics, doing the things that were keeping our communities safe. And one of the things that we learned very early in those conversations is that our communities, specifically in Austin's east and south sides, were experiencing outdoors differently during the pandemic than almost everybody else, from the north, from the west, from the far west. What we were hearing is that those folks were, a lot of them were essential employees, and so they had to leave the home, they had to work. They were very afraid of coming back into the home and exposing their families to COVID. And when they would go outside, the spaces that they tried to bring their families to distance in, to sort of see their neighbors from 6 or 10 feet, distance, did not work. A lot of those spaces are industrial. A lot of them did not have the resources that made, they weren't able to do what I was able to do with my family and my neighbors. I was able to take my family outside as a group, wave at my neighbors at the park, and we could really still continue to be in community with each other from a distance. That is not something that they could do. And we realized that through a partnership with our school district, we might work to change that. Austin Independent School District is the largest landowner in Central Texas. That was among the first things that we learned. And so we began to think about how can we look at these spaces across Austin and then across Central Texas to bring more of those spaces, those green spaces, into the public domain, and also have the public have a say in how they're shaped. And so what we wanted to do was bring our entire network together, not just the folks in East Austin, on this issue, because the other thing that we know as Central Texas Interfaith is that if we move together as one group, we cannot be stereotyped. So it is not African American and Latino folks asking for this. This is Central Texas Interfaith saying we've done our research, here are the spaces that we are looking at, we would like to act with you, council member, we would like to act with you, trustee. And that is the work that we've been doing. So it started that way. We actually ended up beginning with house meetings across our institutions, and there were a specific series of house meetings that really struck us. And you stop me if I'm going on too long, because I get very passionate about this.
This is the stuff. This is why you're here.
We had house meetings on the campus of Houston-Tillotson University, which is this area's HBCU, historically black college. And it became a series of house meetings on Black men's mental health. And what we were hearing from students was, I feel good, I feel safe within the quad of my campus, but as soon as I step off campus, I feel like I'm being viewed as a threat to people who do not know me, but who make assumptions about me. And I would just like to go somewhere and sit under a tree and study calculus without someone looking at me as though I don't belong in that space. And again, I had one of those moments as a mother that really hit me. And because we had been working with our Parks Department and with our council members, we called folks at the Parks Department and said, hey, will you come and meet with these students and hear what they're saying? This is important. Got into a conversation with them, and the students began to identify spaces that they wanted to develop as park, owned by the city. Nothing's happening on that land. How do we create that space and make that a space that any person can go into and make that a space where you can sit under that tree, read a book?
These aren't park spaces already.
They are owned by the city.
Okay.
Some of them have been purchased by the Parks Department, but they've not been developed. Nothing, there's nothing there. And so that became a policy initiative that we called Phase Zero engagement, meaning instead of the city coming to the community saying, look at this great thing that we've done for you, the community coming to the city or the county saying, we've identified this space. We understand it's owned by the city. We'd like to activate it as a park. And so they did. They worked with the city. We ended up partnering with the city and the county and an architectural firm called Design Work Foundation, and came up with a toolkit on how to activate city-owned land, that's perhaps purchased for park but has not been used, and that is going to be going up on the city's website shortly if it hasn't already. That all came from house meetings.
That's a great example of what seems if it's just you and you have this idea, it's like, well, there's a cool idea that's never going to happen. What if that could be a place I could go sit with my classmates? But you all now have a toolkit. That's amazing.
We have a toolkit.
Yeah, we
because
have a toolkit. We have a toolkit.
Yes, we do. We do.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
And just that feeling of agency that comes along with that. Like, oh, good ideas can develop into action items and steps and green spaces.
Absolutely. If there is a will from the community, and it's a shared will, and if the community is willing to research it, because these students did an awful lot of research as well. Talked to journalists, talked to political leaders, pulled their professors in, and then brought other community members in. St. Julian's was a part of that. You've had a couple folks who've shown up to our house meetings and had conversations with students about this. Yes.
Yeah, please.
It begins with
let me just repeat the question back for the folks who are...
So the question is, we're not talking about a small little park. It's a lot of land, right? So it started with a small park right across the street from Houston Tillotson. There are other, however, yes, there are other pieces of land that we've identified in East Austin. There's a Tillery Field project where we're now working with the city of Austin and watershed protection. That's about 20 acres. There's another section of land in South Austin that's about 11 acres. And so we're really looking for those spaces and looking for leaders to take that on. It's really important that the leaders do the work themselves. I'm happy to support, and I'm happy to find people to work with them and connect them with folks, but it's always based on, folks who saw something, decided that they wanted to work on this, and wanted to bring other folks in to work on it.
I grew up in Northern California. We had a park called Park of California. It ended up being like a soccer field.
Exactly.
A whole, area where the kids could go on. It had like the slides that didn't get hot. Stuff like that. And there was also attachments to nature.
Right.
Same land, right?
That is.
It wasn't because of that houses were built. But on the outer edge, it
So it became part of the hub of the community? Yes. That sounds very much like the Tillery project. That came about through House meetings. This is a very similar theme, where we brought together students from Houston-Tillotson University and an East Austin soccer club that is largely immigrant, that had been playing on this field for 30 years, but with no infrastructure. And Houston-Tillotson has a really great soccer team and no home field. They play in Round Rock, even though the campus is in East Austin. So we brought them together, brought the city in, and now the city is, we're working on a plan with the city so that the city provides the infrastructure, the irrigation, and the two communities have agreed to maintain it jointly. So that, what's very important about that is that these are Black and Latino folks who are working together within East Austin, but they're also reaching out to their allied communities to say, this is something that can work in other places. Will you join us in this effort?
We're into our
Thank you.
outreach committee has a vision statement, sort of tucked within the vision statement of the church as a whole, but particularly for the outreach committee, that is charity and justice with neighbors near and far.
Yes.
And the way that I have thought about our Austin Interfaith connection is, especially where charity meets justice with the neighbors nearby.
That's right.
That's right. And especially like just thinking about like, well, we notice things. We notice things. One of the things that we've noticed years ago here is that there are in certain communities throughout Austin and Travis County, there are hungry folks who are asking for money at the overpasses.
Right. Right.
One of the things that we decided to do was just pass out manna bags, we call them. Just tuck some things together. We prepare them every month or so, and then people pass them out. That seems to me like the beginning of just paying attention that can turn into something new. So you do that enough, you start to ask questions like, why are there hungry people here?
Right.
And how are they collecting here? And what's the history of our involvement as a church and as a community and as neighborhoods with folks who are economically disadvantaged, which is sort of where the charity meets the justice. Like, I think both of these are very great things to have, but there's a development there. Like, if I can have compassion for my neighbors enough, I might start to ask the justice questions, which is how I've always thought about the work that we do with you all.
Yeah.
It's okay when I start to ask that question. I know what to do if I say, oh, boy, I would like for the people not to be as hungry. I can give them a manna bag.
Sure.
But if I want to ask the question,
why,
and how do I involve myself at a deeper level, that's where I need partners, and that's where I need some wisdom and a community.
Right. And I really love that example because my church does the same. My church, saw the same need, and our youth group began to make those bags and began to ask the same questions, like where are folks coming from? Why are they here specifically, and what is my role, and how does my faith play a role in how I address this? Because as a Christian, I can't look away. I'm required to act. And so how do I act? I don't act alone. The issue is too big to act alone. And so then I want to have a conversation with folks who are seeing the same things to figure out what we do on a larger scale. This would be something we look at countywide, something that we look at for our area in Central Texas, and then who are the folks that we need to talk to make changes? Are these elected officials? Are these appointed officials? We're in relationships with those people. So where do we get in, and who needs to be at those meetings?
And I love the connection there that you made to your faith. So I think everybody in this room would agree that, that some sort of honest confrontation with the world around us is part of our faith.
Yes.
If you see something that's really unjust happening around you, there's some sort of response that calls up from us. It may be sort of get ourselves to safety and pray, but some sort of response. But then there's so many cases where an honest response means we need people, we need wisdom, we need support, and that's where the work of Central Texas Interfaith
That's right.
is faith work.
That's right.
It's just faith work that has sort of stayed with the problem and gathered with folks around us who can help us address it at a deeper level.
No, that's an excellent way of putting it, because what you're recognizing that that I may, through my institution, have power. Institutions have power because they have longevity and they have people. But when you pull those institutions together and move together, on an action, especially one that, we do ask our leaders to do their homework. By the time we're in front of an elected official, we know the issue better than they do, and we don't put people in front of elected officials or appointed officials untrained and untutored, because that would be wrong. What we do is train our folks, ask them to engage, ask them to learn the issue, we learn it with them, and then we decide how are we going to act. And we don't always, act in ways that are expected. It could be that we have a civic academy where acting means we come together as Central Texas Interfaith and we teach the larger community about the issue so that we're all resting on the same level of understanding, and then we go to power. So it is where power meets power. You pull your power in so that your power is equal to the power on the other side of the table.
I would love to open this up for some conversation with the rest of you. I'm imagining you're thinking thoughts or thinking of questions, and sort of let those percolate to the surface and toss them out while we've got Ms. Harris here with us.
While you're thinking about that, I would add that that Father Miles, your leader, is on the board of Central Texas Interfaith and has been very helpful in guiding us all these years. I don't know if you know, and I'm really, one of the reasons that I wanted to come to St. Julian's is to thank you for Father Miles and to let you know that St. Julian's has been a very important part of directing the work of Central Texas Interfaith for many years.
Yeah, he's done a lot of work with schools and
Yes.
particular school funding.
Yes.
And has
Yes.
given a lot of us time to researching.
That's
to
right.
Conversations, understanding that issue more deeply, so that he could be part of that work. Yeah, Nan.
In this Texas legislature
Yes.
right now,
Yes.
what is Central Texas, what are we doing, and what are you excited or most hopeful about in this session?
Yeah.
Nan's question is, what's the legislature, what is Central Texas Interfaith involved in this session, and what is Warinda most excited about in terms of that work?
Well, Warinda is most excited about making sure that I spend less than the required number of hours at session so that I do not have to register as a lobbyist. Because spent a lot of hours at the session, last session, and this time around I want to be very, very careful. We are, you mentioned the work that Father Miles had been doing with schools. So we worked the last two sessions to defeat Chapter 313, which was a bill that allowed large corporations to request abatements to pay less in taxes in order to spend, to pay a certain amount of money, a set amount of money to school districts. We did not feel that was fair. We did not feel that it was equitable, and so we worked to defeat it in 2 sessions ago. It came back last session under a different bill, and so we worked to change it so that it was a better bill, and lo and behold, it is back again under another bill number, and we are working to make sure that the protections that you all work so hard for remain in place this year. We also worked last session on Medicaid, on introducing Medicaid for mothers 1 year postpartum to give them that first year of care We worked with Catholic Charities and Catholic Diocese on that. We look to work on that again. This is going to be an interesting session. It has already been an interesting session, and one of the things that we've worked very hard on, we've been there a lot, is making sure that we stay in relationship with everyone. The other thing that we've done this session is the students, beginning at Houston-Tillotson and then pulling in all of the other 8 Texas HBCUs, crafted a bill and found a sponsor to declare HBCU campuses and have them train as democracy schools to teach civic education free to the public on the campuses of HBCUs. That's HB 3296, I believe, and the students just testified at a hearing. We went as Central Texas Interfaith to support them, and we are looking to make sure that that bill gets shepherded through. In a very contentious legislative session, this is a bill with bipartisan support, and very proud of that. Very proud of the work that the students are doing.
Yeah, Debbie.
Thank you.
So we are actively working to build our ability for people in the community to be part of Central Texas Interfaith. And so Catherine Wicker is our
Yes.
contact, and she has been starting to meet with members of our congregation, kind of under the guise of our outreach committee. However, it is open to anyone. So if you have any interest at all, you can ask me about it. I happen to chair outreach as of right now, but it's a committee, but you don't have to join the committee. You can just come and we can tell you about the times they're meeting and the information they're sharing. And anyway, so I just wanted to pitch that out because that's something we've been trying to do for a
Yes.
while. We're finally kind of getting that going. And
Very glad. Very glad to hear that. And the reason I'm glad to hear that is because it's two ways. It's not just St. Julian's supporting the other institutions. The other institutions want to support St. Julian's in whatever you see rising up in the community that we can work together on. And so part of the ways that you do that is having those relational meetings with each other, with Catherine, and house meetings where you begin to talk about what are the areas of concern, what are the pressures of our families right here, and read that back into Central Texas Interfaith so that we can put you into community with others who share that. You have been a stalwart and you have been faithful, but we also want to support you.
Debbie Dodds is here. I'm just saying it again for those who are seeing this online. ddodds@stjuliansaustin.org. Yep. ddodds@stjuliansaustin.org. If you want more information about St. Julian's, the Outreach Committee, and our particular involvement with Central Texas Interfaith, that's the place to start. We have done house meetings here. We've drawn up agendas. We've talked about what are the issues that keep us up at night that we would like some support in addressing and not just worrying about. So if you're interested at all in some of that work, that's the way to do it. That's your doorway here. What other questions? What other questions, thoughts? Would you like to bring up for us? Yeah. Cool.
I have a question about faith. So I think we've heard a lot about how
Good.
faith has probably had an impact on the work you do and things that you choose to do. But I'm curious about how the work of the people you've done along the way has impacted your faith.
Great question. You want to repeat it back?
That is a good question, and I'll go. So the question was, how has the work that I've done and the people I've worked with impacted my faith? And boy, I'm a work in progress, and so as are we all. And I'll go from large to small. When I transitioned from a leader into an organizer, that was around the time that Central Texas Interfaith and the network of West-Southwest Industrial Areas Foundation began a relationship with Pope Francis. And several of our leaders, including a leader here in Austin, traveled to the Vatican to meet Pope Francis in 2022.
She was a student of mine, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
And then invited back again for two other visits. And one of the things that I can recall that they came back and said was that Pope Francis, we talked about our work and, talked about the work that we have done, particularly across Texas in the colonias, bringing water and sewage to communities that, had previously not had it. And he said that this work was of God. And my background previously had been in corporate insurance. No one had ever identified my work as being of God. and
The
I
act of God in the insurance world was a whole
totally
other thing.
different.
Whole other thing.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And it was while I was transitioning, and I can remember, my former colleagues saying, you'll be back. And I'm like, the Pope says my work is of God. You can't touch that. And then the second thing I would say, just as on a micro level, working with leaders, working with the folks that I work with has changed my life, has really strengthened my faith. In fact, I think I mentioned that I was struggling before. When you see people who are barely getting by, people who have negative relationships with power, negative experiences with power, when you train folks to understand that they can have power, that they can have collective power, and that they can sit across the table from a congressperson and make a demand and expect that it be met, it is a beautiful thing. Not because of the tension, because there's tension there, but because you see the balance of power shift. You see people realize that there is more to me than this, and this other person is recognizing that there is more to me than this, and that has really informed my faith, because I'm working with someone who previously thought they had no power, and now they know better. And while we are not a religious organization, as a person of faith, that speaks directly to my faith and to my relationship with that person and my relationship with God.
It's making me think about the way that Paul talks about the body of Christ. One body with many members.
Many members.
And if you see yourself in isolation, you're missing something.
That's right.
Sounds like part of your journey has been, my faith, my whole community of faith comes with me. My broad ecumenical
That's right.
community of faith comes with me when I'm sitting in front of this person, this powerful person in front of me.
And I am at ease.
Yeah?
I am at peace.
Wow.
It is a beautiful feeling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go, last question, Oresti. I know we do have to vacate this space because there's something else happening in here in a few minutes.
I understand that there's blood pressure screening. I would like to get my blood pressure taken.
Everybody understands non-partisan
Yes.
from a political point of view.
Ah.
My question is a simple one. Is there any outreach or involvement with religious groups that are not Christian?
Ah.
Yes.
I mean, I understand the Judeo-Christian business.
Yes.
But also I'm thinking about Hindu societies
Yes.
and Muslim groups in the area.
Yes, and what's been, I've actually been leaning heavily on my church that has those relationships to see if we can pull those into Central Texas Interfaith, because we need more. It's a fair question. It is a good question. We need more. It needs to be more inclusive of all faiths, and we are reaching out. We're also reaching out to make sure that there is support for our Jewish congregations as well.
There's some basic questions with these groups. I did a study once for different religions, and I tried to figure out what they were doing in the community, because that was most important to me. And it seemed to boil down to food for people and shelter.
Yes.
Those are the most basic concerns.
And of course, those are the concerns across the board, right? So that is the end, coming in on the shared concerns. Yes.
We have historically had relationships with at least one or more mosques from the area.
But we need more.
We do have some.
We have some, but again, the pandemic has really been interesting in that when we distanced ourselves from each other because we had to, coming back has been challenging. And some of our institutions have been more robust in that than others. And so we are very interested in pulling those back in. If you have ideas, if you have interest, if there are people that you want us to talk to or you want to talk to, I'm very happy to have that conversation with you.
Lorinda, thank you so much for
Tony,
taking the
thank
time from your week to be here with us. We've really benefited from your presence here. Thanks.
Tony, thank you, and thank you. Thank you, St. Julian's. Thank you very much.
My mic has fallen off, so
I
I guess
see
that
that.
concludes us. Yeah. I guess we're done. Gravity has spoken.